so much has been happening as of late that it is hard to keep up. But don't worry, we're going to hit the highlights for you, and Bobby will give his reactions and biblical guidance on hot topics like Barbie, aliens, and more. Welcome to the show that loves doubters. We have lots to cover, so we are going to just dive right in. Sound of Freedom is a movie starring the Passion of Christ actor Jim Caviezel. It is a thriller about a former Homeland Security agent battling human trafficking. Now, one of the surprising things about this movie is that Disney produced the film and then put it on the shelf. It was finally bought by Angel Studios, the studio with the wildly successful show The Chosen, and it was released on the 4th of July, 2023. Now, Today.com says this about the film. But as Sound of Freedom soars in the box office, the controversy around the movie is on the rise too, with critics alleging it paints an inaccurate picture of human trafficking, and the film has ties to the conspiracy group QAnon. Bobby, what is your review of this movie, and what do you make of the controversy surrounding it?
Well, I do know that the director has removed himself from the controversy of it being related to QAnon. So all that to say, there has been that removal. But the sad part of it to me, Tim, is the distraction of what's really happening. And that is there is human trafficking that is taking place. In fact, you and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, due to the quick access to some of the exits and stuff. Charlotte has a huge influence of sex trafficking. In Southern California, like in Newport Beach, like one of the top spots where, these Newport Beach businessmen, are consuming what is being produced in the world of sex trafficking as they pay for these young girls and what they can offer. It's horrific. In fact, I knew a guy once that worked undercover as a rescuer, and he would go in and literally, like a hitman, have to take out some of these people who were enslaving these young girls and rescuing these kids from sexual slavery. And so it really broke my heart, Tim, to hear that we're making this about QAnon or a controversy. I just kind of think if there is a little bit of extremism on any of the points, and I'm not saying there is, but if there is, let's just get to the heart of the matter, that a movie that is painting the reality of trafficking children in a bad light, and that we should be broken about it and do something about it, that should be non-controversial. And I'm thankful that this is exposed and shed light on what's taken place.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, we saw the movie. It was hard to watch just knowing that this is happening. It's just a reminder of one of those awful, terrible, evil things that happens in our world. And I would give license to any film that's like kind of, based on a true story in some sense. They're going to take license to make it more dramatic, to shrink some of the timelines and whatnot. So I'm kind of expecting that going in. But like you said, I think we can all be united on the fact that sex trafficking, especially of minors, is terrible. Any other thoughts that you want to add to that?
Well, I do think that, the cast did a good job. The acting, was great. I just feel like as far as the movie goes, it's not so much for me even about critiquing how well it was directed, how great the acting is. That's all important, for the award ceremony, to be able to figure out who they want to pass awards out to and to look at stuff like that. For me, I'm just more concerned about the central message and bothered by the fact that we're not aligned, that this is a real problem. We have to deal with this. And any opportunity for the evil one to get in and cause us to, be dialoguing about whether or not this is part of QAnon, it just seems absurd in light of the bigger picture. We've got a real problem, and that is kids are being trafficked, and we should be applauding the work that's being done by authors and artists to be able to draw exposure to this. And yes, that doesn't mean just because you're an artist or you're somebody that's writing that you can't depict this stuff in a bad way, but clearly the message of this director was, we have got to do something about it. These lives really do matter, and we need to put an end to it.
Well, let's move to the Barbie movie. Next came out around the same time. So IMDb's one-sentence summary of the plot of the Barbie movie is that Barbie suffers a crisis that leads her to question her world and her existence. But as Bobby, you and I both know, there's political conservatives that are very vocal about their opposition to this movie. So Bobby, you watched the movie. So before we get to any more of the controversial bits, give us your overall impression of the film.
Yeah, it almost sounds funny, talking about Barbie as a movie. Like, how in the world can you make a movie called Barbie and it be a success? I felt kind of goofy going to Barbie, to be honest with you. And, you're looking around and there's dress up parties and everything else that's going on. It just really took me by surprise, the kind of traction that this movie had got. I had no plans of seeing it. I wanted to see Oppenheimer, and my wife said, I think that you should watch this, hon. You're an apologist, and there's lots of apologists that are putting stuff out on this, and you should just watch it because of the controversy, to know what your thoughts are on it. And so, hey, that sounds good. I watched it through that lens, and my overall feeling was one of surprised by the reaction a little bit that went out, in particular, in the church. I definitely would say that you can see, that the message is this a little bit. Okay, it starts off in, Barbie land, and you've got Ken in Barbie land, and he is just a sucker for Barbie. And as you're watching, the movie, you're thinking, man, it's painting him as a dunce. He's nothing without, the affection and the love of Barbie, that he just can't get the attention to. Barbie's caught up in this perfect world of just every day looking the same, but then she grows discontent with this world. And then all of a sudden, Ken and Barbie, they kind of go off to the real world. Ken learns some information that he's been oppressed. And so he recognizes, call it the critical theory moment, where there's oppression and the object is woman. So let's overthrow that. And now he, back in Barbie land, now Ken land, becomes the oppressors with the men of women. And so it's just the flip. And then obviously things settle down by the end of the movie. I would say, is there a theme in the movie that, it's a world ruled by men? Yeah, but the answer is not, the world shouldn't be ruled by men or women. And so that's what we often do. We go from one extreme to the next. Like, oh, look, this is the kind of world that is produced when men oppress it. Okay, so what's the reaction? Let's get a world that women now are in control. And so you don't take toxic masculinity and answer it with toxic femininity. Mm-hmm. But overall, Tim, I would say aesthetically, I guess you could say, hey, it had a cute aesthetic. There wasn't cussing. There wasn't, sex in the movie. It was slapstick. It was goofy. And so for me, I really would have no problem taking my kids to a movie like that, letting them watch it, and then asking questions after the movie, like, what do you think the central message of the movie is? What do you think the movie's trying to say about masculinity, about femininity? Is it trying to say that one role is better than the other? What does the Bible have to say about gender roles? And what should our response to a movie like this be? And so this shouldn't surprise us as Christians to see a movie coming out of Hollywood that would present some of this gender battle that you can see taking place. But overall, Tim, there are a lot worse movies than watching Barbie. You just have to be aware of some of the points that are there and then use it for discussion.
Well, totally. Well, I think we should discuss one of those points. So maybe some of the more controversial bits here. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I tried to find a clip of the actress America Ferrera kind of giving this long monologue. It doesn't quite exist yet. The movie is too new. So you're going to have to suffer through me reading just a little bit of this to kind of get a flavor. And then I would love to get your response. So she says this: "It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think that you're good enough. Like we always have to be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say that you want to be thin. You have to say that you want to be healthy, but you also have to be thin. You're not supposed to, or you're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not too pretty that you tempt them too much, or that you're threatened because other women are supposed to be, part of this sisterhood or something. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself in knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know. So again, sorry you had to suffer through me reading that model. It's much longer. I kind of cut it down a little bit. But Bobby, what do you make of this quote and kind of the picture that the whole movie paints of women in society today?
I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, even consider what's taken place with the LGBTQ, and the transgender piece is basically eliminating the category of woman. And thankfully, women are speaking up. Think of what happened to J.K. Rowling, and I love the podcast that she did in response. But here's somebody that would be pro, LG, B lifestyle. But then with the T, she sees this as a real threat to femininity. It's erasing really what a woman is. When you've got transgenders saying that they've got menstrual pains taking place, or pregnant people, what's happening is you're losing what it means to be clearly a woman. So then when women, if they have a clear definition, they feel like they're being told that, the definition is you have to be beautiful, or the definition is you have to, be completely submissive to your husband and be a helper, or the definition is one of confusion, whereby, you don't even know what a woman is, because now you have trans women that are coming into the mix. So I feel like this is very confusing. Think about, the messages that they do receive, right? Don't tempt us as men with your dress style, but, we want you to be beautiful. You can really understand this. I mean, I do think that there has been some toxic masculinity. And I do think that women have experienced oppression in our history. I mean, the very fact that they couldn't vote until our country was well on its way is a problem. So there's good things that can come out of a movement like feminism, but a feminism movement without any breaks will then end up needing a masculinity movement, because that will have become the oppressive movement. So we really do need to get our cues as Christians from the scripture on what God says we are as man and woman, and learn how to embrace that identity.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, some of this statement is appalling. When I, hear it, or when I was reading through it, I was thinking, yeah, and I don't think that that's the picture of, male and female, or even just, female relationships that should be it. I don't think that should be the reality. And I do think that that is more of a symptom of where our culture has abandoned Christian values than where they are embracing them. So speaking of Christian values, what did you think of how the movie portrayed the actor, or the character Ken?
I know, right? I mean, it's interesting, Tim, when you're watching this stuff, because it can be a little bit, humiliating to see how we're depicted as guys. I'm one of those guys that I don't feel like I'm easily offended on stuff like that. So where some people go, I don't like how they're depicting Ken. He's just a doofus. He looks like this. And I go, yeah, on one side, I can see that, because in the first part, he's depicted as totally desperate. And then he's a despot. And so it's kind of like he can't figure out really who he is, right? It's like he needs Barbie in order to feel like himself. And then he doesn't need Barbie at all in order to feel like himself. But then when he feels like himself there, he's a complete despot. And then on the other, he's completely dependent upon, another for a sense of identity. So I don't like the way that we're often depicting men. But you know what? It's a taste of our own medicine, and women don't like the way that they've been depicted a lot either. But that begs the question, do we always have to depict men and women as they are, or can we depict men and women as they're perceived or as we want them to be? And so sometimes, a director is going to depict its characters not as they are, but as they want them to be, or as they are. It might depict them to be, the way that they really do live. So it's just, what's the purpose of the film? And for me, I didn't find it offensive. It's kind of like the Harry Potter series. People went crazy in the church about that. And I thought, my goodness, there's so many things that you could watch that, in my opinion, that are far worse. And you can come with some teaching nuggets out of this stuff if we look for them.
And again, I've been frustrated too, but, with the way that men are portrayed, like every man is like Homer Simpson, but every character in every show is a conglomeration or a stereotype of whatever that character is. And we understand as we're consuming entertainment that there is some stereotypical things there. So let's move to another topic. Again, we're hitting a whole bunch of them. Aliens. So there was a guy named David Grush, and he is an FBI whistleblower who claims that he has witnessed, kind of life from other planets, if you will, what we now call UAPs, formerly known as UFOs. You can watch his video that he did an interview on News Nation, and he also was questioned by Congress. So let's get to the actual practical point. Bobby, are you worried about aliens from other planets?
Personally, I'm not. I know that, this particular individual, David Grush, as a whistleblower, he was convinced that, he saw some documentation that, under Mussolini, that there was, a foreign spaceship that, has been hidden. And whether or not there's aliens and life on other planet, I'm not too concerned about that. Would it surprise me in, a universe so vast if there was other life? Yes and no. I'd be surprised. Like, I'd want to know what that life is like. And then no, because the universe is massive. I guess the feelings that I would have is, are we okay? Are we going to be engaging with these aliens anytime soon? Does the posture seem friendly? What do they want from us? What do we want from them? What's the learning curve going to be like to learn how to connect? Do they have an idea about God? What kind of learning have they advanced? What's their origin story? Have they produced books and movies and film and music? What is it like? How many senses do they have? Is there another sense that's a powerful sense that I've never even thought of? Like, all this kind of stuff, that would be the kind of things I would be thinking about if we're going to encounter these aliens. But I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but you forced me to for a moment. So those are the kind of thoughts I guess I would have.
I did. Well, maybe that's a little bit of a difference between you and I. Maybe not a lot of time, but I do spend some time thinking about it. I mean, I think one of the limitations is energy, like how could, the nearest possible inhabited planet is something like 30,000 light years away, so how can, any kind of carbon-based life form make that travel? I mean, really the only way that I've heard it from a scientific community is something like wormholes, where you can like bend space and time and jump from one spot to another spot. And that seems so out of the realm of possibility that you could even if that was possible, that like something could manipulate that, or like something outside of a divine being could manipulate that. So I know that there's been Christians that have talked about possibly these being demons or something from the supernatural realm that are, kind of making themselves known to people that are in the occult. I think that's a plausible explanation. But again, I have no idea. I'm kind of agnostic on that whole thing. Yeah, but I do think one question that does come up is, if life is discovered outside of the earth, what, if any, effect would that have on the truth of Christianity?
I don't think it would have an impact on the truth of Christianity unless you are in this position where, suppose now you're able to interact with these aliens, and then the aliens were telling us that there is a plurality of gods, and they had all this evidence that we live in a polytheistic universe. Well, that could pose a bit of a challenge where you're having to, now I'm doing apologetics with the content that the aliens are saying is involved. But in general, I just don't see it being a problem, because the truth of Christianity, the Bible's not telling us about other planets necessarily that there's life existence. That's not the point. It's telling us what's going on Earth. So if I was to think about what could threaten our belief, it would only be the fact that if there was aliens from another planet, if they were challenging the truth of Christianity and providing lines of evidence for an alternative worldview, I guess we'd have to consider that. But I don't think that our arguments, even that we already leverage in Christianity and apologetics, I just don't think the aliens, what are they going to come up with, right? Like, right. We believe theism is a better argument than polytheism, and we believe Christianity is the best expression of theism. And so I think that we'd still be leveraging the same type of argumentation.
Well, we have one more topic to get to, but I do want to remind our audience that if you have enjoyed any of these topics and you want us to dive deeper, or you want to hit related topics, we would love for you to let us know that in the comments of this video on our YouTube channel. And while you're there, go ahead, subscribe to our channel, like this current video, share it out with your network. It's a completely free and easy way to help support this ministry. So let's get back to our last topic. It seems that the buzzword continues to be unprecedented. So Trump has been indicted again, I think for the fourth time now. Maybe it'll be more by the time someone watches this video. But one of the things that I think, this isn't a legal podcast, Bobby. You and I are not lawyers, and so we're not necessarily going to talk about the legal or the legal points of this. But I do think that it does have some downstream effects on culture and what Christians should be thinking about in light of all this. So, Bobby, how should we think about this cultural moment, we as Christians, with a former president, someone that's in the 2024 presidential campaign, being indicted on several, and I do mean several, accounts?
Tim, obviously, if there's wrongdoing, then there needs to be justice that is enacted as it relates to the court of law. So I just can't get to the bottom of whether Trump or Biden, where their guilt ends and where it begins. There's so much out there, and depending upon which news station that you're listening to, it's kind of like, what authority you choosing to listen to, and you're going to buy the arguments of and believe. And that's unfortunately the way information just works in general across different fields of learning. So that said, Tim, I think for me, the bigger concern is, number one, I'd say it's not a good look having our past president and our current president with his son, what this does internationally. It's a bad look. Secondly, what we need to get back to is recognizing that we need leaders that have a moral compass. And we've lost sight of that. That our culture needs to be led by people of virtue. And when you don't have virtue, you end up with these type of problems that we have been in. And so what do you expect when you're just looking for leaders to pass agendas so that we can do whatever we want with our genitals, or you're just looking for leaders to give you the most amount of benefits? Well, guess what? You can get leaders that can give you all kinds of stuff. But what we need is leaders that will be moral exemplars to us, show us what it looks like to discern right from wrong, to be chaste and upright, and to value true justice. But when you get people with a lack of morals, and then they go before courts of law, and then now all of a sudden, I don't care about what kind of morals my president has until he breaks his morals, then we want him to pay a just price. Right. So I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Give me what I want, or, so we just are very problematic. We need to get back to having leaders of virtue. That's what I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And that is one of the disappointing things about kind of this, current cultural moment. And I think one of the other, kind of pieces is that as these charges keep coming, it seems like Trump is going up in the polls. What do you make of that?
Well, poll numbers don't mean a whole lot to me. I think that everybody in the polls represent numbers and individuals that need human hearts to be transformed. And unfortunately, I don't think Trump or Biden aren't going to be best for the culture, just going to keep us in this divided state. I would hope that we could find a leader that can figure out how to bring the parties together and to lead out of godliness. And if the person's not a godly person, hopefully they're just a person who cares about, good natural moral law and keeping those types of values intact for us.
Amen to that. Well, if you have enjoyed these cultural conversations, you might want to check out episode 26 of Christianity Still Makes Sense, as Bobby spoke with author and podcast host Justin Briley about his latest book on the surprising rebirth of belief in Christianity. We'll see you next time.